Hey everyone, it's Scott from Wildlife Inspired. My social media stuff is down here on the bottom. Now, set up behind me is all of the equipment I use to carry and support my gear in the field, whether it's monopods, tripods, ground pods, slings. We got it all set up right back here, and I'm going to jump up there and walk you through it. So I'm here with the various methods that I use for either transporting my gear or supporting it out in the field. And I'm going to go through each. I've got 3 or 4 here to show you today. Now, I do want to make a caveat. This is my personal preference. There are many ways to do all of these various supports, but for the people that are subscribed to the channel, by the way, if you're not, please go ahead and do so now. There's a ton of great videos already on the channel. But I thought, let me show you how I do it. Let me show you my preference, and then talk about maybe a couple of options in there for you too. I'm going to start with the tripod. The tripod is by far the most common. It's kind of the iconic wildlife photograph, the wildlife photographer behind the tripod on a gimbal head. I'm just going to tell you a couple advantages and disadvantages of this tripod. For those of you who have not watched my monopod video, I'm going to put a link up here, and go ahead and make sure you check that out after this one, because I'm going to show you why I shoot only about 10% of my wildlife off of a tripod. The biggest disadvantage being portability. The advantage of tripod by far is stability, and the ability to rest the camera. So it's very stable. I'm using a brand, and by the way, almost nothing here is sponsored. So I've paid for just about everything. Anything that was given to me, I will let you know. I use a company called Faisal for the legs and the ball head. I will tell you the ball head's okay. It's good. I wouldn't say it's the greatest. I don't use that many, so I can't give you a great recommendation on it. I like the legs a lot. They're a little bit cheaper than some of the, I would say the top or the most expensive brand, like a Gitzo. You'll see a lot of wildlife photographers shooting off of Gitzo legs, Wimberley heads. So if you haven't invested or you're looking to upgrade, always keep those two on your list. I think they should be kind of the reference point for everything else. But I tend to look for a little bit more value. So I will often choose brands where I can save several $100s to get what I think is comparable or close to. And in this case, these Faisal legs have worked out very well for me. I also know that I'm very, I take my equipment out in the field. I'm pretty rough on it. So these legs will go in swamps, in water, in salt water. So I have to have something that is absolutely sturdy. So that's number one. And I also know that it may cause me to replace these legs quicker because of the conditions I'm in. So if I was shooting in pristine conditions all the time, I could make a high dollar investment and expect it to last me literally a lifetime. So these I probably expect to get 5 or 10 years out of anyway, which is for me pretty good life. All right, let's look at the head real quick. You're going to see a lot of people shooting off of gimbal heads. Now you could shoot off of ball head, and there are other types of gimbals, the most common being a swing arm. The swing arm will start up here, have an arm that goes down, and the camera will actually rest down here, and it will swing like this. Now, I use a side mount. The only reason I use a side mount is because it gives me the adaptability to use the ball head. If I was a dedicated tripod shooter with a dedicated gimbal, I probably would invest in one gimbal head that was a swing arm. But because I shoot a little bit of macro and a little bit of landscape and a little bit of portrait, and I do use the tripod legs for wildlife, I wanted something that just had more flexibility, so I went with a ball head here, whatever one works for you. Make sure it's rated to hold a significant amount of weight. I try to get my my ratings to be at least 30 pounds, and if I can get them to be 40, 50, or 60 or more, even better. The legs especially, you want something that's rated to hold a lot of weight. It just gives you an extra cushion there in terms of comfort and stability and peace of mind. What I do with this is it pops on and off the gimbal. So we call these a side mount. Wimberley makes one called a sidekick. It's about 3 or 4 companies that make this. This one is by Pro Media Gear, and I really, really do like it. I will list everything in here. This one retails for around $300. It has the versatility of being able to come off of here and go onto another piece of equipment. That's why I bought it originally. So I could take it off of here and put it on a monopod. But now that I have multiple setups, I've dedicated each to a different stabilization. So for the tripod, I'm using a ball head, Pro Media Gear. This is called a tomahawk. And the obvious advantage for this, real smooth. The friction control on these tomahawks is really, really nice. I really like this one. Again, this was not given to me, but I would absolutely recommend it. The two brand references, again, for tripods is generally going to be Gitzo legs, Wimberley head. Those are your references. Very, very expensive. There are other options out there that I think are very close in quality, if not equal in quality. And sometimes you can buy them a little bit less expensive. Sometimes they're also a little bit more. So take a look at these. Okay, so that's what I use about 10% of the time, but that's kind of the iconic setup, the tripod. I'm going to go into what I use at the beach. Now, in my last video on monopods, I showed you this head, and I had it extra. This is a Movo. It is, again, a sidekick for my shorebird photography. The options are normally a ground pod. So this is a pan. I'll tell you what kind of pan I bought for this. And then you can use any type of head. You can use a tilt head. You could use a swing arm gimbal, or you could use the side mount gimbal. The advantage for me on the side mount is it simply just tilts up and down. You don't need to tilt much here because you're trying to shoot ground level. Just a little up and down. So if you get a bird in flight and you're shooting low, you could still pan and get that, but most of the time it's waterfowl or shorebirds, so it does the job. The swing arm will actually swing a little bit like this, so you actually have to rock your head back and forth. The side mount tilts straight up and down. Very much like a tilt head would only tilt straight up and down. Now, why don't I use a tilt head? Used it for years and years and years. I don't like it because it simply just flops. Once you take the tension off a tilt head, it is much more apt to flop. Right now, you can see it's balanced and I can move it. So the obvious advantage is it's stable, it stays in one place, and then you can, when you're ready to go, you just adjust the friction if you need to, but for the most part, it's there. You can get the base to rotate, or you can actually rotate the whole ground pod. So with a tilt head, you have the option of putting the tilt head on and just kind of rotating the ground pod. This one actually has a base that swivels, and it's very, very smooth. Now, the one caveat to this is not a traditional ground pod. This is a paella pan. So for you foodies out there, you know what that dish is, paella, that really yummy kind of rice-like dish. The head on this was so wide. I don't know if you'll be able to see it here. Okay, maybe there, maybe there. You see that little tension knob right there. Every other ground pod that I tried, I couldn't get it, and I really liked the head. So I thought, let me just go and find a pan wide enough. And this was the solution. It's about 2 or 3 inches deep. I forget if it's 18 inches wide or 15 inches wide, but it was big enough to accommodate this. I measured it out, and then I just simply drilled a hole in it and put the bolt through, and that's my paella pod. So I think I'm the only person in the world currently using a paella pod in wildlife photography, but that's how I use it. That's the head I use. Total cost on this to me was about $130. Actually, the paella pan was about 20 bucks on Amazon. The head I got on sale for $70. It regularly retails between $99 and $179, depending on the websites that you're at. But expect to pay about $100 if you want this Movo head. I will link that in the bottom as well. Now, here's what I shoot off a lot of the time. This is my songbird setup. I will shoot sometimes even at the beach. Sometimes I'll take this setup. Sometimes birds in flight. Normally birds in flight, I'm using that or handheld, and I'll get to handheld in a minute. And this is my monopod, and this is now the dedicated head that I'm using. So my last video on monopods, I showed you all these 3 heads, and this is how I've allocated them out. I'm using the Wimberley side mount BH100. What I like about it most, I love it's light, simple, and easy to carry. It rests very comfortably on my shoulder. So this is what I have gone to. I've gone away from the Pro Media. I've dedicated that on the tripod. Wimberley is now on the monopod, and it's just very, very simple. It works very easy. It's off axis, so that does take a little bit of getting used to, but honestly, you'll see I rest my hand here, and as I'm using it in the field, it's just right here if I need to adjust tension or lock it, and it's just so simple. Now, why do I use monopod? Talked about this a lot, but if you watch any of my videos, you know I'm always shooting into windows and tight spaces. I love foreground and background, and I love what I call microhabitat. Microhabitat to me is those fine details where the bird is in a field of flowers or in the trees, and you see the patterns of leaves and you see the background. And to do that, I've got to get into tight windows. It would be virtually impossible for me to do that with a tripod. Now, if I was setting up perches, so in other words, I staged the area, and then used water features or callback to call a bird in, tripod would probably work because I know where they're going to land. I've preset that up. But I don't shoot that a lot. I typically shoot in the field because I like the variability. I like the natural environments. I also like the randomness that comes with just not knowing what you're going to get or where they're going to land. And sometimes the patterns that are created by nature, let me show you some examples. The patterns created by nature are crazier and more interesting and more colorful than the patterns you can get in your backyard. So this is my setup, the Monopod. I use this about, oh gosh, at more than 50% of all my wildlife photography is taken from a monopod. I would probably guess it's closer to 70 or 80%. About 10% off the tripod, which leaves me a little bit of ground pod work, and then the last one, which is hand holding. Now, the disadvantage of the tripod or monopod, I'm going to show you right here. I got nowhere to put this thing. So if I'm standing around, I have to hold it the whole time. And if I want to switch up, I have to rest it somewhere. So I'm going to try to rest this against my table while I show you the next setup. I'm actually going to take this lens off real quick as well and show you what I use to carry. So let's say I'm going to hand hold. I hike quite a bit and I like to shoot hawks. And when I shoot hawks, I actually shoot them handheld. I shoot a lot of accipiters, which are very fast moving. Here's a couple examples of sharp-shinned hawks that I shot over the last couple of years. These guys move real quick. So what do? Well, I hike up with a strap. This is made by Black Rapid. Again, not endorsed. I like it. I also chose one. I've used a couple of other models. This one has a little shoulder strap on it that locks it into your shoulder, and I do like that. It took me a little bit of getting used to, but the reason I like that is because sometimes this wanted to slip and fall all over the place, and this really does lock it in. When I'm doing hawks, I also tend to carry binoculars. So I've got binoculars strapped here, and this strapped here, and sometimes I even have another accessory, which I'll show you in a minute. I chose an Arca Swiss plate, so I just locked the plate in here. Always check this, and always, this is a huge thing, always make sure that you check to make sure this is tight. This will sometimes work itself loose, and if you're lazy and hiking a lot and not checking it, it can actually loosen up. Always make sure the Arca plate is tight. You can also bypass this and screw directly in here, but that's going to kind of lock you into that setup while you're out in the field. With this, if I did need to get rid of this, I could unscrew it and then hand hold it for a while. So this is what I hike in with, and I'll just carry it in like this, and it works really well. Now, the last thing that I will do often, sometimes with the monopod, even the tripod, but wherever I'm going, if I think there's going to be interest in flowers or insects, I like to bring along a macro lens. And sometimes I'll get up there for sunrise, and I will dabble in some landscape. So I like to take a second body with me. And when I do that, this is the only piece of equipment that was given to me, and it's by Spider Holster. I really like this. I actually got another company that approached me about a holster device, and I told them I didn't even want to consider it because I like this so much that in good faith, even if they were giving me product, I couldn't in good faith endorse their product knowing that this was my favorite. So this one works pretty simply. You've got long lens adapters, it's an old 70 to 200 that you can pop in. So I will take a 70 to 200 if I need to. If I'm shooting mammals and birds, that's a good option. If I'm shooting macro, I don't have my macro lens here, but I would take this. This is a friend of mine loaned me their Sony. I've got a video coming out on this and how I liked it, but I can pop that on here. So these are, a little bit longer lenses, and that's fine. Or I can take up, and I can just take a little landscape setup. So whether it's a 50 millimeter or I'm actually recording with the 24 to 70 for this video. And I can just pop that right in here, and it's real easy. There's a lock here. I can lock it in, or I can take it out real quickly. So that's really what I use. I use the tripod for shorebirds and waterfowl. Sometimes I'll use this ground pod along the shore for waterfowl. In the water, I typically use this setup in the water. And then the monopod is what I use almost always for songbirds. And since I shoot a lot of songbirds and I hike, I do like that setup a lot. So I use that monopod quite a bit. Got to get this thing off. It's got a little safety button there. Yeah. But there's some product here, and I think you'd be interested maybe to explore or research a little bit of these on your own. Now, if you aren't using anything right now, if you're just walking out in the woods and hand-holding and you're looking for that first investment, the thing I would say is, what are you shooting the most? and what makes the most sense and what style do you shoot. So if you are shooting a lot of stationary or slow moving subjects with short hiking distance and wide open spaces, honestly, a tripod for avian photography makes a lot of sense. If you shoot owls, eagles, harriers, things like that. If you shoot setup locations and setup perches, tripods make a lot of sense. You're shooting, let's say, hummingbirds that you've set up and they're coming into a feeding area. The tripod makes a lot of sense. If you're shooting songbirds in tight windows and hiking a lot, I think the monopod actually makes a lot of sense, and that's what I use the most. And then hand holding, if you are hand holding, get yourself a strap. Like, it makes a lot of sense. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to worry about dropping your camera or just wearing out your arm. It's very, very comfortable. Black Rapid makes a great strap, but if you do some research on that, as I think you're going to find that's probably the most common. If you carry a second body or accessories, think about these spider holsters. I love them. And if you're doing shorebirds, or if you're doing ducks from on the side of a lake, look into these ground pods. You can make them yourself, relatively inexpensive. I told you for this one, I actually paid under $100, but right now I think if you were to try to set this up retail, you'd be paying about $130. How much does all this cost? Well, I'll try to put prices down there. You can actually get the links to everything you see in the video in the description, and I'll jump back to the computer now and wrap up.
All right, there's my stuff. Hopefully it made sense, and hopefully you understand the different applications that I use each of those support systems in and what they're for. Maybe there's something in there for you to think about. I tried to give you a couple of budget options, a couple of value options, and then show you practically why I chose each. There is no right or wrong. So I think one of the things you always have to do is figure out what type of wildlife photography do you want to do? What are the circumstances? Make a list and then go from there. Do you need a tripod? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Monopod, yes or no. You don't need it all. As you accumulate the gear, you may find that there are specific situations where some works better. And if you're just figuring out where to go first, look at the styles of photography that you shoot the most and then make some decisions on there. Now, if you want to get an idea of price and descriptions and technical stuff, I tried to list everything that I had back there, including my paella pan. I tried to put it down in the description so you can get an idea of what I'm using and also what those costs are so that you can start to prioritize. So I hope you found this video helpful, and all of the other videos I have on the channel, please explore and check out. There's a lot of free content out there. If you're looking more at editing and work in the field, you want to come with me behind the scenes, also check out my Patreon site. I think you'll enjoy that site as I do a lot of bonus content there. So check that out at patreon.com. And I do want to thank you for all your support, and I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.